Hi, this is New Time on Silkway TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happened throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and world. I'm Dorian Sagulov and this is what you'll see today. The UN Summit for the Future took place in New York. What did the world leaders discuss and what reforms does the UN itself need? Saudi Arabia is investing $1.5 billion in renewable energy projects in Kazakhstan. What else did the Saudi ambassador reveal in an exclusive interview for New Time? Has humanity reached its limit? An exclusive interview with British Academy fellow Barry Buzan on the New World Order and the end of the superpower era. The UN General Assembly took a marathon week of diplomacy with the Summit of the Future. It approved a blueprint to bring the world's increasingly divided nations together to tackle 21st century challenges. Those issues range from climate change and artificial intelligence to escalating conflicts and increasing inequality and poverty. Beyond the summit, key geopolitical concerns were also on the top of agenda for many leaders. Balzhan Samigulina will point out on main outcomes of the global gathering.
In 2020, the United Nations turned 75. A big anniversary was marked by starting a global conversation about hopes and fears for the future. This was the beginning of a process that has eventually led 4 years later to the convening of the Summit of the Future, a major event which took place in New York this week, just before the annual high-level debate of the General Assembly. Leaders and representatives from over 130 countries attended the two-day summit. UN member states negotiated 3 documents to adopt: a pact for the future, a declaration on future generations, and a global digital compact. Amid a complexity of challenges, including the crucial need for sustainable development, Secretary General of the United Nations Antonio Guterres said it was absolutely essential to ambitiously use the summit to come up with adequate governance for the world of today.
I called for this summit because our world is heading off the rails and we need tough decisions to get back on track.
Global crises have spotlighted the need for UN reform and overhauling international security and financial systems. Those include the 15-member UN Security Council, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. The humanity still needs to overcome geopolitical challenges like acting military conflicts in different parts of the world, climate change, widespread national debt issues, and concerns over technology advancing without governments.
Our world is going through a time and turbulence and a period of transition. But we cannot wait for perfect conditions. We must take the first decisive steps towards updating and reforming international cooperation and make it more networked, more fair, and more inclusive now.
In an announcement at the summit, Kazakhstan Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs Murat Nurtuliev revealed that the country will host its first regional climate summit in 2026. As he noted, this event will aim to tackle the pressing challenges Central Asia faces to climate change, such as rising temperatures, melting glaciers, and desertification. The Kazakh diplomat emphasized that by 2050, Central Asia could experience the impact of global warming more severely than other regions on the planet.
In addition, we propose to open the United Nations Regional Center on Sustainable Development for Central Asia and Afghanistan to further enhance coordination on SDG deliverables. I'm confident with the right support, this idea will serve as a future role model for UN development mechanisms.
The doors of the UN symbolize the hope for stopping or preventing the geopolitical tensions. Experts wait for the organization to tackle these challenges. But as analysts explain, while expectations are high, fundamental change might be hard to achieve in the short term. Balzhan Samigulina, New Time.
The key outcome of the recent summit was a major international agreement, the Pact for the Future, also known as the UN Reform Plan. According to the organization, the document is aimed at ensuring that international institutions can operate effectively in a world that has changed drastically since their inception. One of the most discussed aspects of the pact is its progressive and concrete commitment to reforming the UN Security Council, the most significant efforts of its kind since the 1960s. However, some experts remain skeptical of the reform plans. As with many other UN documents, the pact sets out ambitious goals, but lacks clear steps for how to achieve them. More details in the following report. We can't build a future for our grandchildren using a system built for our grandparents. With this statement, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged world leaders to recognize the need for reform within the UN. He highlighted the growing global challenges, escalating conflicts, widening inequality, the climate crisis threatening economies, and the uncontrolled rise of AI, issues for which he believes the international community currently has no effective solutions.
Conflicts are raging and multiplying, from the Middle East to Ukraine and Sudan with no end in sight. Our collective security system is threatened by geopolitical divides, nuclear posturing, and the development of new weapons and theaters of war.
And while there may be no solutions today, the UN's Pact for the Future aims to tackle these challenges tomorrow. The UN describes the pact as the most ambitious international agreement in years. It outlines 56 key actions, ranging from sustainable development and conflict resolution to human rights protection and more, that countries have committed to achieving. Perhaps the most crucial element of the pact is the commitment to the reform of the UN Security Council. This includes expanding the Council and reconsidering the veto power to prevent important decisions from being blocked. Currently, only 5 countries, the UK, China, Russia, the US and France, hold veto power. The decision was supported by 143 UN member states, who argue that leaving the fate of international security in the hands of a small, privileged group is an outdated and flawed practice.
We cannot hide our dismay at the fact that the ambition for UN system reform, especially of the Security Council, has been diluted despite its evident ineffectiveness in recent years. Thus, it remains pending to adjust this mechanism to the geopolitical reality that includes the global south and eliminates the veto once and for all.
As is often the case with UN resolutions, the Pact for the Future, while full of ambitious goals and commitments, has a major drawback according to experts who have reviewed the document. It lacks clear, realistic steps and enforcement mechanisms for its implementation. For instance, the document claims that nations will end hunger and eliminate food insecurity, but it offers no specifics on how the UN or its members plan to achieve this.
This document is not about obligatory actions. For example, I am a country who don't want to solve a problem about gender inequality. If I will not follow this document, what international community do with me? Answer: nothing.
The non-obligatory nature of the document is the biggest obstacle to implementing these critically important measures, according to political scientist Tahir Nigmanov. As a result, a genuine revision of the UN Security Council is unlikely in the current geopolitical climate. Any changes to Security Council membership require amending the UN Charter, which needs approval from 2/3 of the General Assembly, including all 5 veto powers on the Council.
If we enlarge number of permanent members of the Security Council, will they have enough equal right to veto? And another problem is about our international system. I think it is very sad. For example, we can remember several cases when big countries with nuclear weapon can do what they want to do without Security Council.
Nevertheless, new agreements are the first step in the right direction. The adoption of the Pact for the Future by 143 countries shows that the international community recognizes the need for change and is ready to discuss global solutions, Tahir Nigmanov added. Whether these ambitious goals will translate into meaningful action remains to be seen, but the call for reform has made loud and clear. That's why UN Secretary-General Guterres closed his speech with that may be the most important words. Now let's get to work. Dauren Isagulov, New Time. The need for reform and restructuring of global institutions like the UN is gaining attention not only from politicians, but also from prominent scholars. Barry Buzan, a co-founder of the Copenhagen School of Security Studies and a fellow of the British Academy, shared his thoughts in an exclusive interview with New Time. According to him, the UN Security Council is outdated, yet reforming it remains an almost impossible task, something that has sparked frustration among many member states. In the following segment of the interview, Professor Buzan delves into the shifting dynamics of power among nations and the challenges that global organizations now face. Please take a look. Professor Buzan, thank you very much that you agreed to do this interview. And let me start with this question. I know you have argued that the era of Western dominance is fading, but not in the way it's often depicted in some political narrative. So my question is, could you please explain us what does the emerging post-Western world means?
Well, it's a world in which wealth and power and cultural and political authority are becoming ever more widely distributed. Right? Mm. So we have lived for nearly 2 centuries in a world that was dominated by a handful of countries, mostly Western, plus Japan and Russia. Their domination was based on the fact that they were the group of countries that industrialized first in the 19th century. And if you look closely at what happened, I mean, after Japan in the later 19th century, nobody else industrialized. No major country succeeded in industrializing. Mm-hmm. And that meant that that first group of countries were rich and powerful beyond the imaginings of history. And they were able to shape the world as they wished. And the dominant group within that was the West, and within that group, the dominant group was the Anglosphere. Now, from the 1970s onward, I think you can see this system beginning to break down, because from the 1970s onwards, a new group of countries began to industrialize. The Asian tigers, then China, India, a bit later. Not quite clear how big this second round is going to be. Not going to be everybody by the look of it, but that process is what's changing the world, right? Because there are more centers of wealth and power and cultural and political authority, and that's what the world is going to look like. The key thing to note is it's not the fall of Rome. Despite some people's wish, the West is not about to disappear. Mm-hmm. It might break up into Europe and the United States. There might be two, as it were, bits of it, not as closely aligned as they have been. Not clear whether that's going to happen or not, but that could happen. But it's not disappearing. The West is going to stay strong.
In one of your interviews, you said that the era of superpowers also come to an end. Is this really a case?
Well, I think so, and I think the argument is fairly straightforward. Superpowers, if you think about it, the idea that one or even two powers actually dominate the entire planet, that's a pretty strange set of circumstances that allows that to happen. So when Britain was the sole superpower back in the 19th century, it commanded about 40% of the global GDP. And similarly, the United States, after 1945, when it became the lead superpower, had about 40% of global GDP. If what I'm saying is true, that we're moving into a world in which there are going to be more and more centers of wealth and power, it's just not going to be possible for anybody to get 40% of the global GDP. Right? So superpowers, to my mind, are a historical phenomenon. Right? The problem is not that more than one country wants to take over the world. The problem is that nobody wants to take responsibility for managing the world order. the West is losing its legitimacy and its will to do so, and nobody else is picking that up. So the problem is not who's going to take over the world and how do we stop them. The problem is how do we manage the world order in a time of collective crisis.
May I ask you, what features will shape the new global order?
We could spend a long time talking about particular rivalries among states and arms racing and all of that, but to my mind, the big feature that will shape the coming world order is the collision between unrestrained development on the one hand and the carrying capacity of the planet on the other. We are, as we sit here, heading into a quite substantial environmental crisis. The first feature of it is global warming, but it has other features as well. For the first time, our collective human activities have reached the limits of the planetary carrying capacity. Right? The sea level would be much higher, for example, so a lot of territory would disappear. A lot of places that are now suitable for agriculture would not be suitable for agriculture. Most of the world's port cities, which is most of the world's big and important cities, would be unviable or underwater. I could go on.
Yes.
It would be a different place.
I've got one last question. How do you think these global major organizations, for example, like United Nations, can it adapt to the new way of things, to this new order, or we have to reconsider the whole design of the way of this governance work?
That's a very good question and a very important one. And the honest answer is, I don't know. What I can tell you for absolute sure is that over the coming decades, that's going to be a rather central question in the world order, whatever the emerging world order is. The existing set of institutions was designed for what I call the Western world order, so designed by and for the West, by and large. And there's a lot of resentment against those organizations because of the distribution of influence and voting power and all of that within them. Things like the United Nations Security Council are very important in political and legal ways. But what are Britain and France doing sitting on the Security Council? That's ridiculous. So the Security Council is completely out of date and almost impossible to change, right? So the Chinese will veto India, and they will veto Japan, and other people will veto Germany, and the EU isn't quite properly a state, so how do you deal with that? I could go on. There are lots of countries, China foremost amongst them, but also India, who want all of that to change, but there's no consensus about how it should be changed, and there's the beginning of a period of rival organizations. So the BRICS countries have set up their own banks and their own lending organizations and such like, and those are bargaining chips in the long negotiation ahead about whether we can reform the existing institutions to take account of the new distribution of wealth and power, or we have a long period of competing institutions that work against each other, or we get a new set of institutions and dump the old ones. Usually a new set of institutions only happens after there has been a world war. But for very good reasons, world wars have gone out of fashion, so we can't count on that. We're therefore in politically uncharted territory as to how you do that.
Now back to Kazakhstan. President Tokayev has signed a law on simplified customs corridor between the countries of the Organization of Turkic States. Earlier, on September 13, the Kazakh Senate ratified the agreement for this corridor. The goal is to speed up customs procedures, reduce the paperwork needed, and simplify customs controls. This is expected to boost international trade relations. It's worth noting that one of Kazakhstan's main priorities during its chairmanship of the OTS, under the slogan of Turk time has been to ensure the free movement of goods. The results of the past year's cooperation under Kazakhstan's leadership will be reviewed at the upcoming 11th OTS summit, set to take place in November this year in the capital of Kyrgyz Republic. And now let's take a detailed look at the numbers. Since the beginning of the year, Kazakhstan's foreign trade with member countries of the Organization of Turkic States surpassed $10 billion. 61% is attributed to exports, amounting to $6.4 billion, while imports account for 39% at $4 billion. The OTS currently includes 5 member countries: Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Turkey and Uzbekistan. Together they cover a total area of around 4.5 million square kilometers with a combined population of 160 million and a collective GDP of over $1.5 trillion. At present, trade between OTS countries has reached $42.3 billion, while their total trade with the rest of the world stands at approximately $1.3 trillion, making the OTS a significant player on the international stage. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev extended his congratulations to the King of Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud in celebration of the kingdom's 94th national holiday. Kazakh president highlighted that Saudi Arabia stands on a strong political foundation and has made significant strides in strengthening its economy. He also noted that Saudi Arabia is a key partner for Kazakhstan in the Middle East and expressed his confidence that the friendship between the two nations will continue growing, benefiting both peoples in the years to come. Saudi Arabia, the largest economy in the Middle East, is actively seeking to develop joint projects in Kazakhstan. This year marks the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two countries, during which the parties have established strong economic and political ties. In an exclusive interview with New Time reporter Baljan Samigulina, the Saudi ambassador to Kazakhstan highlighted that the countries will focus on enhancing their partnership in green energy development. They are set to implement a joint project for the construction of a wind farm in the Jetusu region, with the Saudi company investing $1.5 billion in this renewable energy initiative. What other areas appear promising for potential collaboration? To find out, watch the interview right now.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, let me congratulate you on the 94th anniversary of establishment of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And now we are witnessing the celebration dedicated to this event. We can see that political government in two countries do not actually affect on the strong relations between Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia. How do you evaluate the bilateral cooperation between our states, please?
The relationship between Saudi Arabia and Kazakhstan has deep historical roots. Saudi Arabia was the first country to recognize the independence of the Republic of Kazakhstan and one of the earliest to establish diplomatic relations with it. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of these diplomatic ties. Our partnership has been developing across various sectors, including political and economic avenues. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's visit to Saudi Arabia in May 2022 provided a significant boost to our relations. During this visit, several agreements were signed, and the president participated in the GCC plus Central Asia Summit. At the ministerial level, we anticipate additional visits and agreements, particularly in the fields of ecology and climate change. Our country has its Green Saudi Arabia initiative, and Kazakhstan is also pursuing ecological projects, so we aim to enhance cooperation between these programs. Moreover, we are pleased to report that the Saudi company Aqua Power has signed a contract worth $1.5 billion to implement a renewable energy project in Kazakhstan. There are several other projects in the pipeline as well.
So you already touched on joint agreements between Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia. We know that Saudi companies have been actively involved in investing into Kazakhstan since the 90s. What can you say about the agriculture sector, which both countries identify as one of their priorities? Can there be any investment projects expected between the two countries?
Agriculture is a promising sector for our collaboration. This year, the Minister of Agriculture of Saudi Arabia visited Kazakhstan during which he held discussion with the President of Kazakhstan. The delegation included specialists who explored investment opportunities in Kazakhstan. A month ago, the chairman of the Saudi Development Fund also visited and met with President Tokayev, where they discussed the implementation of joint projects in the agro-industrial complex. We're optimistic that they will invest in these initiatives. Saudi Arabia views Kazakhstan as a key player in promoting food security, and we hope to strengthen our cooperation in this area.
Yeah, now experts say that trade volume between Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia can be much increased through the transport and logistics sector, which is quite important, I think, for two countries. Can we expect that our Kazakh products can be somehow exported to Saudi Arabia through countries as Turkey or Iran or any other prospective route that you can mention now? Can influence to this sector.
Within the framework of the Intergovernmental Commission between Saudi Arabia and Kazakhstan, several companies are actively engaged, and meetings have been held to discuss logistics. We anticipate signing a logistics agreement between our countries and are also looking forward to the launch of direct flight. While there are challenges in the logistics sector, we are committed to addressing these issues as we move forward.
Speaking of these direct flights between Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia, when can we expect the development in this area to have eventually direct flights between the two countries? And can there be any, result of visa-free regime between citizens of Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia to visit Mecca?
The number of flights between our countries is on the rise. There is already a direct flight from Almaty to Jeddah operated by FlyNAS and Air Astana. Midway through this month, we expect to launch direct flights between Shymkent and both Medina and Jeddah. This development further increases the connectivity between our nations.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us.
Thank you so much to host me. Thank you so much.
And now to some other news topics. The national women's chess team of Kazakhstan won the historic silver medal at the World Chess Olympiad in Hungary. Having achieved this result while competing among the strongest chess players of the world, now it's time for the members of the Kazakh team to set new ambitious sporting goals. Bibisara Asaubayeva, Alwa Nurman, Ksenia Balabayeva, Miruert Kamalidzenova and Amina Kairbekova after the tournament were also warmly endorsed by the President of Kazakhstan. More about triumphant leap of the Kazakh chess team at the World Olympiad in the following report.
In response to the historical achievement, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev took to his X account to celebrate their success. He called it an outstanding achievement for the Kazakh chess school and its remarkable representatives, and offered his wishes for even more accomplishments in the future. Kazakhstan Chess Federation reported that at the 45th Chess Olympiad held in Hungary, the team defeated strong opponents from US and Poland, narrowly missing victory against India by just 1 point.
На мой взгляд, это индикация сумасшедшего интеллектуального потенциала, который у нас есть.
In my opinion, this indicates the incredible intellectual potential we have that is now being unleashed. We didn't just secure second place, we were competing closely with top leaders throughout much of the Olympiad. For nearly the entire event, we were positioned between first and second place. For many of our players, this was their first or second Olympiad. They will have many more opportunities ahead, gaining valuable experience along the way. I have no doubt that we will achieve gold in upcoming Olympiads. This is a strong indicator that we are truly becoming a country with a bright and promising intellectual future.
In the final results of the competition, our athletes secured 8 victories, 2 draws against teams from Georgia and the US, and suffered just 1 loss. Head coach Pavel Kotzer noted that despite facing intense competition, they kept their composure and focus, leading to an outstanding performance.
The girls have consistently raised their status. Last time we placed 5th, and this time we took 2nd. Of course, no one expected this. We are the youngest team among the favorites, with an average age of under 20.
For 3 of us, this was our first Olympiad at this level. We had little experience, but we weren't afraid. We were confident in our abilities.
This silver medal is particularly significant as it marks a historic rise for the team, moving up from the 5th place in 2022 in India. Now the team is gearing up for the 2026 Olympiad, where new achievements are expected. Polzhan Samigulina, New Time.
And today we join in celebrating World Tourism Day. Kazakhstan is positioning itself as a new hotspot for enthusiasts of nomadic culture. The country has seen a record influx of foreign tourists with over 500,000 international visitors in September alone. This surge, according to the Ministry of Tourism and Sports, is largely attributed to the 5th World Nomad Games held in Astana. What specific achievements has Kazakhstan made in tourist numbers? Stay tuned for more details in our upcoming report.
Thanks to the World Nomad Games, Kazakhstan's economy received over $600,000. As for the geography of tourists, aside from neighboring countries, the highest number of visitors to the Kazakh capital came from China, India, Turkey, the US and Germany.
A total of 16 visitor centers have been set up across Kazakhstan to promote ecotourism and environmental education. We have around 9,000 registered travel agents and 500 tour operators, 400 of which are focused on inbound and domestic tourism. This demonstrates a growing demand for tourist services. Additionally, Kazakhstan is signing visa-free agreements with several countries.
Kazakhstan is being chosen by some of the most avid travelers from Germany. While they previously preferred traditional European destinations, this autumn, according to an international industry publication, they are showing interest in Croatia, Serbia, Georgia and the Central Asian countries of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. German travelers find the country appealing due to its heritage along the Great Silk Road, cultural immersion and breathtaking natural landscapes.
Germany
consistently ranks among the top countries that visit Central Asia, including Kazakhstan. Our country is an appealing destination for them due to its authentic culture, rich history and multicultural society. This attracts not only German tourists, but also travelers from other parts of Europe.
Notably, Kazakhstan is experiencing significant growth in tourism investment. In the first 7 months of this year alone, the volume of investment in fixed capital exceeded $975 million, marking nearly a twofold increase compared to the same period last year. Funds are used to create new tourist sites, upgrade existing infrastructure, and improve service quality. Experts note this contributes to enhancing Kazakhstan's appeal as an attractive tourist destination globally. Polzhan Samigulina, New Time.
That's it for today. All the main news about Kazakhstan and Central Asia you can find here. More special projects about our country you can also watch on Silkway TV channel. So stay tuned and see you next week.